Finals is the most serious and ambitious and gritty, realistic, hardcore shoot. No, I'm just kidding. The Finals, this is a game by Embark Studios, and I was actually invited to a private playtest to check this game out. And I know a lot of people have been anticipating this one, so I did get my hands on this, and I was able to play it for a couple of hours and get some first impressions and stuff like that. So today, I'm going to tell you everything you need to know about the Finals before it does release, and whether this game is right for you. I'm going to talk about the things I really like about the Finals, and I'm also going to talk about the things I really don't like about this game. So just some brief background on the game. This is again made by Embark Studios, and the people that comprise this actual development studio itself is a bunch of ex-DICE employees. At least a lot of them are, and you can definitely see that style. You can feel that influence in the actual core of the game, everything from the art style to the literal gameplay mechanics as well. But the fundamental core idea behind the Finals is that you are in like this virtual game show, and your job is to battle other teams and try to acquire the most amount of money possible before the time limit ends. You can basically steal money from other teams, you can eliminate them and take theirs, or you can just extract money on your own. And that's how the basic game structure is set up. You know, you have these vaults that contain cash. All the teams rush for it and fight for it. Whoever can extract the cash and then bring it to a cash out station and defend it will, you know, increase your score. And so you can do this by playing aggressively. You can try to do it by third-partying people or playing passively. There's a lot of strategy baked within this game, which is a lot of fun. So I want to start about the things that I really did enjoy about the Finals and the things that I feel like really work. First things first, the core gameplay loop feels really solid. And what I mean by that is both movement itself and gunplay and stuff like that. There is one thing about the gunplay that's an extreme negative for me, but I'll get to that later in the video. But for the most part, the way that the player interacts with the environment and the world and how you get around is pretty intuitive and pretty smart. You do have a very battlefieldy kind of, you know, movement system, although it's slightly faster paced with the addition of the slide. There's a lot of zip lines and other ways to interact with the map. So as far as movement and theoretical gunplay go, it's actually very smooth and it's intuitive. You can tell that these people are experienced in FPS, so it's an extreme positive for me. The game just felt good to interact with in that way. Also, one of the selling points of the Finals itself is that, sure, this is sort of like an arena style kind of multiplayer game, but the thing that really turns this format on its head is the amount of destruction that is available. Basically, this entire map is one giant free-flowing sandbox in the way that however you choose to interact with the map will completely determine the outcome of the game. So every single weapon, equipment or other item, they all engage with the world in incredibly unique ways, and you can make this entire experience the way you want to engage with it. There's very little rails, if at all. Another thing that I really like, speaking of that sandbox, this game has a very unique revive system. If your teammate dies, they drop a trophy, and instead of just having to revive them in that exact spot they died, you can pick up that trophy, kind of like you would in like a Gmod sandbox. You can toss that trophy anywhere you want, so maybe throw it in a safe corner, and then you can go and revive your teammate when it's more safe. It was super intuitive and well designed, and I had so much fun with it. And it's like, I think that's a good way to describe a lot of what the Finals capture, is the fact that it gives you a lot of the base ideas and mechanics that are present in a lot of FPS games, but it takes them totally off the rails and lets you decide how you want to interact with it. The destruction element that I was talking about earlier is a massive part of how the core gameplay loop does work. And again, like I said, you can really tell this was designed by a lot of ex-Battlefield guys just on the way the destruction quite literally handles. And that is a compliment. For the most part, the destruction was super intuitive, it made sense, and you could do what you wanted. Like, if you wanted to destroy a certain wall of a building or, blow the floor out from underneath it, you can do that. Pretty much any point in the game where you're asking yourself, will the game let me do this? 99% of the time, the answer is yes. I think that's the stuff that worked for me. If you ever feel like you play FPS games or just like arena shooters where the game, sure, it might be good, but it's like it feels so on the rails where everything works a certain way. There's one specific function for everything and you can't really like deviate outside of that stuff. The Finals is the antidote to that, where it is just like genuinely a giant sandbox, but that has FPS rules. That's probably one of the biggest compliments I can give to the Finals, and may be a giant reason to engage with the game, because as far as other FPSs are concerned, this game feels it's like there's hardly any programming that tells you, yeah, you can't do this. Sure, there are some rules about things you can and cannot engage with, but for the most part, it was surprising me every single game about just how like creative it could really be. Also, another thing, you can very clearly feel the Battlefield influence influence on is the class customization and just the way that the characters work. It's not a hero shooter, so it's not like an Overwatch or Valorant where these characters have very specific attributes and uses and all this stuff. Basically, your choice of class customization is you can choose between a light character, a medium, or a heavy. That's it. And then within the rules of those classes, you have certain weaponry and equipment you can use. So it's a very light class system, and I think for this game style specifically, works like a charm. And then finally, in the good, before we start moving over to the bad, the game has a great style. Everything from like visually, musically, everything encompassed into one. Again, it's that very Battlefield-y look, which is not even a bad thing. That's not a criticism. I think put into this context, it works really well. It's like this, again, it's not trying to be like hardcore or realistic. It's this very arcadey feel, but still feels somewhat grounded and believable. And also the maps we played, granted there were only 2 on our playtest. I assumed there's going to be more in the closed beta and on launch, but the maps we played were excellent. We had Monaco and then Seoul, and these maps play distinctly differently. It's not just, a basic reskin, but the map more or less plays the same. No, these 2 maps they felt like 2 entirely different game experiences in some sense, and that is a good thing. It provided a greatly different gameplay style every time we engaged with a different map. So that was a lot of the good stuff the finals has to offer. It has some really unbelievable positives, like it has some excellent things going for it. But now I want to get into the things that it clearly struggles with, has some problems that need to be addressed, or just maybe borderline deal breakers. And I'm going to start with the worst of them all. I'm just going to bite the bullet and get this one out of the way, because I do think that this is unfortunately going to make a lot of people write the game off immediately. So the fact is, there is no controller support for this game. Now, let me address this really quick. We did not have controller support in our private playtest, nor do I think it's going to be part of the closed beta. However, they do plan on bringing it to console, and of course it will have controller support on that. But as far as PC goes, I'm actually not sure if it's ever planned to have controller support. It very well may get added for the full release of the game, but from what I was told, they say the plan was to eventually release the finals on console, but their focus has been creating the best PC experience first, so they're not going to offer controller support to the game for our preview event or the closed beta, which is really a bummer. I'm not going to lie, that does suck. As someone who is primarily a controller player, it's playable on mouse and keyboard and stuff like that, and I enjoyed my time, but I feel like I would have enjoyed it more had I been able to play on my native equipment, which is a bit of a bummer, and I do think that's going to be a deal breaker for some people. But again, just take that with a grain of salt. They might have it for the full game, but if you're expecting to play controller on the closed beta, I think you can go ahead and assume that you will not be able to. Also, speaking of the gameplay, and I said theoretically the gunplay is really good, and that's still true, but the practical interactions, there are some things that are unbelievably broken and unbalanced, which kind of works in this game's favor, kind of works against it. They kind of go for the approach where, like, if everything's overpowered, then nothing is. For example, there are some classes that are just like blatantly not going to be able to keep up, or some weapons like the AK is maybe one of the worst guns in the game, although it's like a starting weapon. There's pretty much no reason to run it for a lot of reasons. It doesn't do a ton of damage, it's not as good as the LMGs, and it doesn't actually shine at anything at all. Also, there's strategies like if somebody is healing you while you're in a gunfight, you will literally never die. This was the meta that was discovered in our playtest pretty quickly. People were just having one healer and then, basically one gunfighter, and they were unkillable. It was actually insane. This is something that has already been addressed, and we've, been talking to them. They are very, very attentive to the community feedback and like how things are going to be balanced and all that sort of stuff. So it's not like the game is going to be an unbalanced wreck forever. But with that being said, I do want to say, I think that's why this game was kind of charming though, is because everything was like so just ridiculously like wild. Like when everything's super fair and balanced, then I think unfortunately it may work against the point of this game to be like this really big and open sandbox. Of course, there is some things that, should just be fine-tuned, but in a lot of ways, if this game had really ultra fair balance for like a competitive sense, I think it would take a lot of what makes it fun to begin with. And that's a whole can of worms I don't want to get into right now. That's why a lot of people feel that and this isn't just for the finals, but the beta of a lot of multiplayer games is often more fun than the full build of the game, because that's the more like fine-tuned and balanced one. But when you play that version that's so like, unrefined and kind of broken, it can be super enjoyable. So I don't know if that's going to be, how this game plays out, but that's a can of worms I really don't want to get into right now. However, I just, to sum up, the balancing issues are all over the place, but they are actively working on it. That's all I can say. So another bad thing, and this is in regards to gunfighting and animations in particular, there's this hella annoying weapon bounce that when you're coming into ADS out of sprint or really just any other movement, option, you have this really massive weapon bounce that in the most important moments of a gunfight in which you're acquiring your target, it's almost impossible to do so. Specifically with this gun, it happens on every weapon, but it's the worst on the AK, I noticed. But like, this just straight up does not need to be in the game. I don't think this weapon bounce adds any like good effect to it. Just makes acquiring your target take longer, it's more frustrating, and it adds zero to the gameplay loop. I will say, from my understanding, a lot of this stuff in terms of weapon balance and even these animations are being actively looked at. So in our playtest, this was extremely annoying, but hopefully this will already be addressed and fixed for even the closed beta, let alone the full game. So I'm hopeful for that. Also, there were some performance issues in like really close combat quarter scenarios when you're, in a building and there's a lot of destruction, there's a lot of people in it and things are going on. The game can definitely stutter. It can make gunfights up close feel really clunky and bad. And again, this is just general performance. This is something that obviously they're going to be looking at. Not really a huge like gameplay balance change, but more just a technical aspect. And my last criticism, I don't want to be too negative on this game, so I really just wanted to condense my criticisms into the most important ones. This game was marketed to us and it's presented as like this totally brand new, innovative, groundbreaking take on FPS, something that's never been done before. And like in a lot of ways, maybe in some sense, but also not really. Like, I think what it does is it mixes a lot of the best portions of other shooters or just other video games that I've played and matches it into one really interesting formula that works well. Does it take a lot of the core elements of other shooters that I love and put it into a really interesting new context and work well? Sure, absolutely it does. Is it this like massively groundbreaking, innovative, something the world has never seen before and something that's going to change the direction of the FPS genre forever? No, I don't really think so. Like, this game is fun, don't get me wrong. I had a lot of fun with it, but in some sense, it wasn't anything I feel like I haven't experienced before in other games, just kind of blended together a little bit differently. And, it's not that crazy innovative. It's not Halo Combat Evolved. It's super fun, don't get me wrong. I genuinely think this game is awesome, but it's not gonna upend everything we thought we knew about FPS. It's not as, like, groundbreaking, I suppose is the only word to say, that they might be marketing it as. That was the only thing that me and my friends felt was a little bit off. It's just the way that they presented it is not what it actually feels like, but that's okay. I definitely think you should still try it and make a judgment for yourself, but I did want to show you guys some gameplay and I wanted to give you my impressions on it. The beta will be coming out soon, and I don't know when the full game releases, but you'll have this in the back of your mind, and I hope you guys did enjoy it. But have a good one, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.